Hey, it's Sunday night. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're here together on the Sunday Night Bible Forum. I'm glad you're here. Trying to get all the equipment to work at the right time, and sometimes that's a little hard to do. Trust that you've had a great week and that you're looking forward to a week coming. We're winding up July. It's, you know, going to be Christmas before we know what happens. Got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. I wanted to talk a significant amount of time relative to the Republican convention. And as you know, the Democrat convention is getting ready to wind up tomorrow. They'll start running through the paces. They're going to have all of their nonsense, as the Republicans did, with all of the machinations and legalities and the different screaming and hollering and people jockeying, trying to get stuff. They've already had one chaotic situation in a sense. WikiLeaks has come out with a whole bunch of emails apparently that the Democrat leadership has been pushing back and forth. And the end result is that Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not going to be the person that you see leading this week's festivities. She was caught in emails saying some nasty things about Brother Sanders. And there's some other kinds of things in coordination with the media. I mean, who knew? I mean, it's amazing. Isn't it amazing? No, it's not. I trust that you are paying attention to what's going on. I'm trying to help you do that. We have a number of websites that are dedicated to that. This is one of them, thebibleforum.net. But we also have the secular side of things, the view from Zoar.com, which is a blog highlighting some of the events pushing us toward the inevitable conclusion as God is winding all of this up. I've been reading and writing some this week on the book of the Revelation. It's every time you go through it, it comes out just a little bit different. There are a number of little issues that flow through the narrative. And the more you read it, the more you see those little things. And you say, well, I saw it before. And you tie that back, and it goes back to the Old Testament, sometimes to Ezekiel, sometimes to Daniel, to Zechariah, Isaiah. There are mentions along the way that then start to make sense. It helps us to understand how we're going to spend so much time in heaven. Eternity is a long time, if that time is the right word, and still not exhaust the knowledge of the Word of God. But here it is. But we're going to do some of that together. The president was in Mexico this week talking about things, the convention, the Republican convention, and the Donald. We'll talk a little bit about that. The Philadelphia Police Department is very upset with the Democratic National Committee. You know, they're going to hold their convention there in Philadelphia next week. But the Philadelphia cops are talking about not even voting Democratic because of the snub. We've got some doings over in Turkey and in Syria. Russia has actually bombed a U.S. installation. And when we complained about it, they did it again. Have you read about that? Have you heard about that? Did they go on the internet or on the news to announce anything like this? I haven't heard much about it at all. We've got a young fellow over in Munich, Germany, who dressed in black and went out with a rifle and a gun and started shooting up the countryside, killed a bunch of people, and finally himself. But since he has not been connected in any way with organized Islam, this is now an isolated event. Yeah, he's Iranian. Yes, he's Muslim. Yes, he was hollering Allahu Akbar or whatever. But it has nothing to do with Islam. I wrote a blog this week. Actually, wrote it on Monday after the Monday Republican convention wound down. I want to share that with you. If you haven't already accessed it, you do need to do that. You need to sign up at the various blog sites, and they'll send you the link when it comes up. I mentioned the BibleForum.net. I mentioned the view from Zoar.com, but there's also TribeBiblicalCounseling.net, and there is LivingGodly.net. We also have the Bible Institute, Bible Institute of Charleston.org. We have some folks who are signed up for this. You need to get signed up. You need to work through these basic Bible doctrines. It isn't a lot of money, and it isn't a lot of time, but it's a lot of information. It's like getting a drink out of a fire hydrant. And the idea is that you would watch the videos, you would have them for a significant amount of time so that you could look at them again, and that you would make notes, you would write this stuff down, and it would then become fuel for your Bible study. It'll also help you. It'll help you to understand the kinds of things the Bible is saying and doing throughout all of its pages. In the midst of all of the stuff that's going on, we have seen Hillary announcing her vice presidential pick. And so we're going to look at Tim Kaine in terms of the faith facts. We've done that with the others. We'll do that with him. We're going to look at a little bit more of the mysticism that's in the church. Along with that is this whole Pokemon thing. Are you involved with the Pokemon Go? Do you have, what are they, all of the characters or all of the creatures? Apparently these are collectibles. Somebody told me there were about 100 of them. I read recently there were like, I want to say 700, but I think it's probably like 400 or 500. What is all this about? We're going to look at some of that as the night wears on. You did get the email this week, did you not? I really like this format. One of the reasons I like this format is I don't have to write so much. In the other format, I felt the obligation to write a fairly lengthy dissertation or discussion explanation, and this one I don't get that feeling. So this one's a little bit nicer, and blue's my favorite color. So if you'd like to have that, you need to email me at the Bible Forum @gmail.com, and I'll stick you on our mailing list, and then you'll get one of these every Saturday. You won't get anything else. I'm not selling them, and I'm not overwhelming you with stuff. If there's something really significant, I will do an extra. I think I have done 2 in the last 10 years. So not a lot comes up that makes me feel like I want to bombard you with another email. Did you watch any of the Republican convention? I ended up watching more of it than I have ever watched before. I've never really been a convention guy. I think that what they're doing is in-house. They're talking to themselves. They're enjoying each other. Not much in terms of news is made at these things. But I wanted to see mostly what the Trump family was like. It's a fascination that here is this multi-millionaire with 5 children, all of whom are millionaires, and how did they all turn out? And as you watch them in the little snippets, you get the feeling that they're pretty much normal. Well, they're Trumps, and so that's not normal. But they're not as lunatic as or crazed as you might have thought. Multi-millionaire Ivanka Trump, it is reported, wore a $138 dress. Hillary had a coat that was over $12,000 at one of her events during this cycle. Other than being poised and self-possessed, which is a very polite way of saying they really like themselves, they look good. and they are probably as normal as multimillionaires can be, having been raised in the lap of luxury, with pretty much everything at their disposal. They seem to be pretty grounded in the areas that matter. And what that means is that they weren't as bad as I expected. But I don't live with them. I don't interact with them, so it may be that they are nuts, just like all these other wealthy, crazy people, but they don't seem to be. From the Republicans, it was a great convention. We now have hope. All Americans included. The Trump speech being all-inclusive, and I think just what we wanted to hear. There was even a standing ovation for a homosexual representative, a man who co-founded PayPal. And we got that from Republicans. From the Democrats, what we got was Trump's a Nazi. Trump says, "I will restore law and order in America." The left goes nuts and calls him a Nazi. Trump's doom and gloom doesn't match reality, they say. The liberal celebrities were not nice. They never are. They said Trump's facts were all wrong. But then later, just a day or so later, a CNN poll came out that said 75% of Americans think this is what I've been waiting to hear. 75%. I know it was 50-some percent, and then it was 20-some percent in the margins, but overall, 75% felt positive about this whole thing. What that means is that only hardcore Democrats didn't like it. Everybody else thought it was the right thing to say. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I wanted to share with you some of this shooter that we saw in Munich. The officials say because the Munich shooter had no connections with the Islamic State, his actions don't reflect on Islam. He simply hacked the Facebook account of this particular mall in Munich. In so doing, he invited young people to come and get prizes and so forth. And then he calmly went about the business of shooting them down in the street. Just your everyday, normal kid. None of the news reports influenced his behavior. None of the religious propaganda influenced his behavior. He is Islamic. He acted alone and without the urging of anything remotely religious. Yeah. And Pokemon is a harmless game for children. The president went to Mexico with an obvious nod toward Donald Trump. The president said, quote, "This idea that America is somehow on the verge of collapse, this vision of violence and chaos everywhere, doesn't really jibe with the experience of most people." End of quote. You believe that? You agree with that? He said America is much less violent than it was 20 or 30 years ago. Well, statistics don't impress the families of slain police officers, or victims of vicious, unprovoked attacks, or those caught up in riots or other demonstrations in the streets. And unless you're asleep, those same American streets are more dangerous today than at any time in recent memory. Not statistically, perhaps, if you go back far enough. There are many smaller towns and villages in America that have no real violence. But in the large, and I might hasten to add the liberal cities, it's like somebody pulled the plug. And anything and everything is fair game. Is that just mere perception? To some extent it is. But perception is 90% of most people's reality. And if you can't feel comfortable walking the streets in your town, it doesn't matter what the statistics are. Over in Philadelphia, the Democrats are getting ready to hold their convention beginning tomorrow night. And the Philadelphia cops, they're livid. They're livid over who will not be speaking at the Democratic National Convention. Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democrat Party upset some police officers this week with their decision on whom to not have address the Democrat National Convention, and that being the Philadelphia Fraternal Order of Police. The police are insulted. The Fraternal Order chastised the presumptive Democrat nominee Wednesday with a Facebook post saying they will not soon forget that the Democrat Party and Hillary Clinton are excluding the widows and the other family members of police officers killed in the line of duty who were victims of explicit and not implied racism and, quote, being on duty in blue, end of quote. One wonders what the security is going to look like. One wonders what's going to happen if push comes to shove in some kind of a situation. I don't understand the leadership of the Democrat Party, except that they are rabid. They are locked in to their liberal, progressive philosophy. And in order to secure the votes, they can't give in to the Fraternal Order's request. Sad. A piece of news that you probably did not hear: Russian bombers conducted an attack on a U.S. military base used by elite American and British forces. This was on June 16th, according to numerous reports. Did you read about it? Did you hear it on the news? Immediately after the airstrike, U.S. leaders in Qatar called Russia's headquarters in Latakia, Syria, to tell them that they should not attack the base. 90 minutes later, Russia dropped another cluster bomb on the base, and the pilots of that aircraft did not bother to respond to any U.S. stress calls. The response from the White House, from the State Department, despite the possibility of U.S. casualties, that response was described as compromised. Defense officials from the Pentagon and CIA claim that Washington succumbed to Russia's pressure instead of confronting the aggression. Can you see it coming? Can you see Russia becoming more bold, brash, more in your face? Why can't they? What's with Turkey? Turkey was in the news this week. Lots of stuff. Turkey is a long-time NATO ally. But under the current president, Erdogan, it has moved closer to Iran and to radical Islamists, in particular the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and some folks even think that ISIS has influence in that country. ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, has been actively recruiting in Turkey, and the president's government has admitted that. Turkish and other media reports indicate that Turkey has provided funds and medical help for the notorious terror group. The Jerusalem Post quoted an unnamed ISIS source saying, "Turkey paved the way for us." Had Turkey not shown such understanding for us, they said, the Islamic State would not be in its current place. It showed us affection. Well, some elements of the Turkish military apparently believed the Islamization of Turkey was not progressing fast enough, and the corruption of the Erdogan government was polluting the dream of an Islamic State on the Bosporus. And as a result, they staged a coup. You might have heard about it. The coup revealed deep divisions in the military, the government of President Erdogan. The coup also ended badly. as pretty much everybody predicted that it would. And now the current president, who was not deposed, is conducting a purge of some of the top leadership of his army. This has and will consist of some of his most capable and experienced generals, people in the first, second, and third ranks of armies, as well as several Turkish air units. The result will make it difficult for Ankara to use the military as an instrument of policy and national strategy in the near future. Yes, the coup was put down, but the aftershocks could hamstring Turkey for a long, long time. And during this period of confusion, other elements in the military will be able to gain a foothold of power, and many of these will be Islamic. The report said the coup failed, but another stronger Islamic coup may succeed in the future, one that may turn its sights south toward Israel, one with an extremely powerful military. The biblical prophecies, almost 3,000 years old, predict Turkish involvement in the military attack of Jerusalem that colors the Great Tribulation period. The Bible refers to Gog and the king of Magog. Magog was what we now call Turkey, allied no doubt with Russia against Israel, the great army that moves in from the north. Are we getting ready for that? We've always been getting ready for that. But it is now nearer than it has ever been. Have you heard of Obama's plan to save the world? He addressed some diplomats at a reception on Friday this past week, the day after a jihadist killed 84 people in France, and said the United Nations plan for sustainable development and global unity is all that's needed to defeat the terrorists. Isn't that interesting? He called for a, quote, new sustainable development set of goals to end extreme poverty and promote health and education and equality for all people, including women. So there you have it. This will end the violence. This terminology was a direct reference to the United Nations' now new 2030 agenda. It was formerly called Agenda 21. We talked about this back in the early part of the 21st century, in which the new Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are being promoted as the answer to all of mankind's problems, including the eradication of poverty and saving the planet from climate change. The 2030 Agenda includes for the first time the rights of migrants to move across open borders for economic opportunity. Now do you understand what's going on? Patrick Wood, writing for Technocracy News and Trends, said, quote, Obama simply reflects his globalist handlers when he suggests that the solution to the world's problems will be found in everyone's submission to a single globalist power. Obama told the ambassadors gathered at the reception that the world needs to, quote, build strong institutions to protect people from those impulses of national or cultural pride. What is that? That's you. That's you, America. The 75% that think that Trump's on the right track. It was a veiled reference to the supporters of Donald Trump and other nationalist-oriented individuals and groups gaining popularity in Europe. These parties are now calling for their countries to follow Britain's recent example and get out of the European Union. That's a path, of course, that will not succeed in America or anywhere else, Obama said. In other words, all Americans should stop being so selfish and self-centered and surrender themselves to the global common good. Obama added that hatred and violence of a few ultimately is no match for love and decency and hard work of people of goodwill and compassion. He wasn't talking about you, was he? You want people to be responsible. You want them to accept responsibility. You want them to do right. Well, my friend, that's apparently not goodwill. He said the world needed to work with our Muslim partners to push back against hateful ideologies that twist and distort Islam. Islam, a religion that teaches peace and justice and compassion. The question is where? Will we defeat these ideologies, Obama asked, by offering a better vision of development and economic progress? And the answer from the UN, from the globalists, from the Agenda 2030 people is a resounding amen. I can't wait. Can you?